Okay. So in yesterday's session, right, we discussed about few things, and that is mostly about the installation or configuring the setup for the Camunda free trial version, as Mohan you have already done. And Mitu, have you also done the configuration setup for the Camunda free version? Am I audible to you?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So have you done the installation setup? Okay. I'll take it as yes. If there are any
Fine.
issues, you can come back. Okay. Fine. With the benefit of the interest of time, I'll not take much time here, right? So, yeah, if you have any issues or concerns, right, in terms of the installation setup, you can reach out to me or training coordinator. Not an issue. So, apart from that, we have just seen, like an on a very high level, what are the Camunda 8 components are, right? If we have a product to work upon, what are the different screens we have? That is more about towards the console than modular part, which is used by the developers and business analysts to design the workflow. ZB, which is not a UI screen, but it is the heart and soul of the product, which act as a backend engine, okay, which has been developed as part of Java programming language. It's a very lightweight engine. And ZB is one of the most revolutionary component, right, which is part of the Camunda 8 if we compare with the Camunda 7. Then we have three other components, which is operate, optimize, and task list. Operate is, as name suggests, right? It has been used for the troubleshooting and monitoring of the instances. Okay. When we deploy any application into production, right? There are several instances will be there, which means for each unique request, right, we can deep dive into the request and see all the required details, okay, into operator screen, which is like similar to the cockpit we have in the Camunda 7. Okay. Then it has been renamed as operate now. And after that, we have optimize, as name suggests. Again, it has been used by the management users to see the dashboards and reports into graphical manner. And last and not the least, task list, which has been intended for the end users, where business users, right, can log into that particular task list screen based on their roles and authentication, and based on their role, right, whatever the task which has been pending part of the processes, they can pick those tasks and process them. Clear? After that, we discuss about the journey of the JBPM family, like how Camunda has been evolved and what the similar BPM products we have, some related to the Camunda. The point here is in the market, if you go right, there is hundreds of low-code products out there. But few people will also think about it. What if I learn of one product, right? Will I be able to work on the other products as well? Definitely you can do. Okay, because here we will be also discussing and understanding the foundation concepts of BPM. So if you work on that BPM part, right, any other BPM tool, what you will be working upon, right, there will be lesser challenges, okay, because the core and concept will remain the same. However, when we talk about the JBPM family, right, which means whenever you have an expertise on a one particular product, which means it's not only about understanding the BPM concepts, okay, also getting familiar with the product as well, how the screens looks like, what are the kind of architecture they have, right, and what are the backend engines they have. So that is where we have an added advantage when we learn about the Camunda BPM. We will be also be able to learn quickly and efficiently the other similar BPM products as well, like Flowable BPM, Activity BPM, or JPPM as well, right? Though JPPM is quite different, but still these other two products, right, Flowable and Activity, are almost similar to the Camunda. So as they evolve from the same family, okay, same source code. So that is where you have to target it. Like it's not only learning about one product, you will be at least having a knowledge on three products: Activity, Flowable, and Camunda. Right. So now, as I mentioned, this week mostly we'll be discussing about some theoretical concepts, okay? And going forward from next week onward, right, we'll be having the hands-on exercises as well when we learn about the concepts of BPM. To know about the Camunda architecture we have, okay? I hope my screen is visible, right?
Visible,
Yes,
sir.
visible.
Thanks for confirming. So yeah, as we know, Camunda has evolved in year 2013, and when they have like come up with the first release, that was known as Camunda 7, right? And with the time, across the 9 years, they have multiple releases and minor versions updated with the component. And in year 2022 April, which is last year, almost 1.5 years back, they have come up with a major release with the restructure of the architecture, which is Camunda 8. So we'll discuss about the core components and architecture concepts of Camunda 7 and Camunda 8. As of now, we have on the screen the core architecture and components which has been used for Camunda 7. And then again, if you learn about Camunda 7 or Camunda 8, almost 80 to 90% things are similar, right? Only thing is you have to know some basic differentiation as well, because it's the same product, okay? There is not going to be any like major what you can say differentiation that you are working on Camunda 7 and Camunda 8, you'll not be able to work. That is not going to be happen, okay? So if we cover Camunda 8, right, everything will be almost covered for the Camunda 7 as well. So here, whenever we talk about a BPM product, right, it always works into agile methodologies as well, which means we develop something and then we have additional requirement. We can work upon those additional requirements as well as part of a feature. Okay, it's a continuous development always, and we execute the things into lesser is what you can say in terms of the milestone. So which means we have any requirement, uh, big requirement, right? Complex requirement. That doesn't mean we have to develop it as a waterfall methodology. Waterfall is something we have all the requirement of a customer. Okay, we have to when we are going to deliver it, right? It has to deliver with all the features, right? So as part of the agile, which has been now widely accepted across all the industries. It gives a flexibility where we, instead of delivering a project at once, right, we will be delivering the different step by step features as part of the iteration, right? That's how all other BPM products also work since the beginning, which is in their core what you can say development, where we have any requirement, we will design our processes, and then if we have additional requirement to mature them, right, with that time we can also create those additional requirements as part of the milestones. And internally BPM engine side, they will maintain the version, so which means we can also roll back to the previous versions as well. Roll back, as you know, right, if something is not working, then we have to go as a previous state as well. Okay, that is known as a rollback. So all these things, right, versioning and everything, how it has been maintained, in which database tables of the product, right, it will be maintained, and what are the options in order to do the rollback, right? We don't have to again code for that. We need to understand the components what has been already there. So as we already told, right, we have a one screen which has been given as a cockpit or operated, where we can do the administrative tasks. So rollback is again, if we require something, right, we can do it by cockpit or operate. So all these options you don't have to code. You should be knowing about the features of the product. And when you know about the feature, it is feasible or it is not feasible, it is doable or it is not doable. Then the next part is how you can do it, okay? Which screen you should go, okay? Which component, in which screen, which particular section you have to go, okay? And then how to do it. And that is how you have to learn it, right? So if you do it twice or thrice, then you will be having what you can say the familiarity with the components, and that will come when we have daily what you can say interactions, right, for this product on routine basis for almost 1.5 months going forward. So that's not going to be an issue. Just trust me. Okay. If you give your time on a regular basis for this training, just 1 hour, or maybe we can revise about the timings as well, as I was discussing with Mohan. At the end, you will be a champ with this particular component. Okay. And again, people are working from 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and maybe many years as well. Nobody is like knowing everything about a product. Okay. And it is a universal concept as well. Somebody is having a very good knowledge, okay, but still there are things for improvement. So that will come the more and more you have interest, right? With the time, more and more you do the development activities. Maybe once you get assigned to your projects as well, you'll learn more things as well. But this training will definitely give you an 100% assurance that you will be able to work on Camunda BPM if you have any task to perform on a real-time based projects. Now, coming back to the Camunda 7 components, we have you can see here, we have a modeler, and then we have the other components. So in the bottom, if you see, right, this is the component which we use for model. Model is something for modeling any application, which means for developing any application using low code, right? So that is called a modeling phase. So for the modeling phase, we have one component which is known as Camunda modeler. So who will be using that? That has been mentioned on top of that particular component. Business analysts and developers use the modeler. Okay. So when they do the development, okay, they'll so here if we go, yeah. So if you see, right, this is on my screen. If you see, this is the modeler. Okay. So this modeler is been used by business analyst or developer. Why business analyst? Business analysts are again non-technical people, but still when they have any requirement, they can use the modeler in order to design the workflow or maybe kind of a flow charts, which depicts to the technical users what type of business requirement it is, right? Though when developer will work, they will take those flow charts as a reference and they will do the actual development. So which means those graphical notations, right, which are being created by the business analyst, they will what you can say, they can add or remove some components, or they can do it technically by also configuring the properties. So that is where when we say any developer is going to work upon, right, again we have in the modeler we have three phases, three parts are there: design, implement, and play, right? The play I'm not going to use it for now, but now design, if you see, right, design is something which has been used only for the design, which means any non-technical user can design your processes, which means like they can say, I have a process where somebody, we need to get some requirements, okay, uh, in terms of requirement gathering for by a user task, and then it has to be reviewed. So we have whatever details we have captured, right, that has to be reviewed by some other particular role of users, maybe manager or maybe some higher authority. Okay. So these are the two tasks I'll be doing in a process, which is very simple. And based on that, right, whether this particular user has approved or it has not approved uh, the request, right, based on that, we can have a different, what you can say, uh, the decisions or the next task to be executed, as simple as that. So there, right, we are just talking about a flow chart. So any non-technical users like business analysts, right, they can use the Camunda modeler in order to specify the requirements. Like we have any other, most other tools as well. They can do in any maybe Microsoft product as well. They can also use Confluence, which is Zira, right? Where also you can create those flow charts, or maybe any other tool as well for whom you are familiar with. But uh, as it provides the graphical notation, right? It is actually an application which we are developing. So it is, that is where we have good collaboration. I have told about, right, before, that non-technical users and technical users will collaborate with each other, which means they will interact with each other quite often and they can understand what is been getting developed. Now, if we talk about the developer side, we have an implement phase. So what happens is whenever we have any requirement, right, or any component which has been designed or developed, you also have to specify the properties. So if you see in the right hand side, right, there are the properties. We have what forms it has to be attached, whom it should be assigned, like it should be assigned to a particular user, this task, right? This should be assigned to a group of users, okay, candidate user, what is the due date, what is the follow-up date. Few things are optional to configure, but few things are mandatory to configure based upon what type of element we are getting. And these elements, right, these are on the left hand side. You can see you have gateways, you have tasks, you have sub processes, events. For events, you have these many type of events. Don't worry about that. All these events, like it is part of our hands-on exercises, and you will be knowing that. So apart from that, you have other things as well, like participants and connectors, which I was telling you, right? You don't have to code much. So like if you want to invoke any REST API, you have a REST API connector. You want to send emails, right? So send grid connector is something, and already a product by SendGrid, right? In order to send emails. So Slack, if you want to connect with Slack, you want to connect with the Google Drive, you want to use the Google Map, right? In your application, you have requirement where you are delivering some shipment and you want to see the coordinates of the what you can say the delivery person. You can also may have a requirement of Google Maps, right? So all these things, right? You have all the connectors involved here. If you want to connect with the chat GPT, you have an OpenAI connector. Okay, you can connect with the chat GPT here itself. And other things as like GitHub. So all these things, we have a lot of connectors are available based on the requirement to requirement. We can use those particular connectors as well. So this is the left hand side, which is called as in the component palette, where you have the different types of element of BPM to be used in order to create your application. And when you drag and drop any application, like it, if I click on this, right, the property section will get changed. Okay, if I click on the gateway, which is a dimension, the properties section on the right hand will get in. So that's where it is the implementation phase. So non-technical users or product owners, right, or business analysts can use the design phase, and implement phase is something developers have to implement also, right? How it has to be executed. So that is called as implementation phase. So both non-technical or technical users or business analysts or developers, right? So people are also who are from non-IT background, like there is a product manager or there is a manager, right, who has some requirement to be given to the team, right? He can or she can use the design phase where they can come up with the actual requirement how it is going to be, and they can which can be taken as a blueprint for developing any new application. So that is known as modeling phase, where we have a modeler component, which can be used by the business analysts and developers. And whenever we have those particular, what you can say, applications to be will be developed, right? They will be exported, okay, from the modeler. Okay, so you can delete also. You can perform other options as well. And even if you want to export those file set, you can export from the modeler in terms of so you can create the files, you can export the projects. So and also you can share the files as well. So all these features. So share, right? If you want to share this particular BPMN file, right, with other users, so you can directly share it, or you can also create a link. And when you are creating a link, you can also make it password protected as well. So that link you can share with the other users. Okay, when they will click on that, that that particular user will be redirected to that particular BPMN model. Okay. And also, if you want to make it password protected, you can also add a password. So when you are sharing it, right, that particular link will be accessed only when that particular credentials will be provided. You can also email them, or you can share the direct link as well. So that helps with the collaboration as well of that particular product. From here also you can share, you can delete, you can do the duplicate, which means if you want to make another copy, right, you can do that. All these options are possible here. And also you can export those files, and here you can edit the name or you can delete the name. So all these options are there, which we will be doing when we are doing the hands-on access. But to come up to the components of Camunda 7, you have a modeler which has been based for this particular role. And these files, right, you can export into a file repository, which means into your machine. Okay. And that file repository, you can keep it into your GitHub location. So whenever you are having any deployed, right? So GitHub is a source code where we have all the what you can say, the deployment files will be there, right, for a particular project. So these files you can directly deploy from modeler as well. But in production, that feature we will use when we are doing our development work, okay, for direct deployment. But if you are going for any production ready application, we also create some pipelines, okay, so where those particular applications which you have created using modeler, right, having the low code standards and notation, you will export them, okay, and then you will be keeping it into a GitHub location. So this option you can see, right, deploy. You can also deploy when you use this option, right? You can deploy from the modeler itself, but that option is one of the option or way of doing the deployment. Usually we use this option into lower environments, which is on our local system or maybe into a development ready environments, not on the other higher environments, because it is not a best practice to do. So that is what we also learn. What are the different ways of doing the deployment? You can also do it by using operate, and you can also do it as part of the CI/CD. So usually when we have production ready application, we export those files, which is a zip file, and that you can keep it in any file repository, which is usually a GitHub location. Any questions so far?
No, sir.
Good. So this other components, what we have is a task list or maybe a custom application. So so whatever components we have with the rectangle and blue line, right? That is part of the product itself. However, whatever we have with the dash line, right, which means it is a customized application or something which is not part of the product. Okay. So here, right, task list, as I mentioned before, task list is already inbuilt UI component coming with the Camunda, where if you deploy those particular what you can say applications. So here, if you see this particular application, right, you can see there are different type of elements are there. Just I think we don't have to go technically into the details, but with the every element is different from other element. If you notice here, right, almost every element is different. How? Maybe in terms of the shape, this is circle, this is diamond, and others are almost rectangle. But even if you notice, whatever the rectangle kind of shapes we have, they are also differing from each other. Here, if you see, there is some different icon is there in the get user details. A human icon is there. In the other thing, we have some other icon. And there is no icon, but the boundary is what you can say thick. So that's where we have different types of activities are there, which can be represented visually by understanding the icons and shape, and that we will learn when we understand what all the different type of elements we have, how BPM is categorizing them, why we have these different shapes. Okay, so that we are going to start from the basics, from the level 0, and then we are going to have it as a intermediate and expert level of exercises, which include sub processes, call activities, exception handlings. So all these things you will be doing by your own. Okay, so don't worry about that. But now to come back to the point, right? If you notice here, right, this particular activity is having some human icon, which means in BPM process, whatever activities you you choose from the canvas from the left hand side, right? They are either the user task, or sometimes you also call it as human task, or it could be a system task. Understood? So user task is something where any external user has to perform some action on it, right? So in order to perform an action, you need some dashboard, you need some UI, right? Where he can go log in, okay, based on his role, he can visualize the task which is assigned for him, right? He or she can pick that particular task and take some action. Action means he can the action which is part of that particular process, the forms we will be embedding with that particular user task, right? So user task you might have seen, right? You can log into some system and you can see some details and you perform some action. Maybe you will complete it, or maybe there are multiple options are there for the user to approve or reject that particular task. But in nutshell, what I'm trying to say here is, if in any BPM application we have user task, right, that has to be explicitly performed by end users, and all other tasks are system tasks, which means there is no intervention is required by any external user. It will be done by the Camunda engines, okay? Whether it's a REST API task, whether it's a service task, whether it's a script task, we'll discuss about all these tasks, okay? What different types of tasks are there. But to understand it, either it's a user task or it is a system task. Clear up to that? So when we have a user task, users have to log in to a particular screen, right? And to see what are the details have been, or what are the tasks which has been pending for them to complete. For that, we have a task list, okay, where end users will go and log in, and then they can see that not all the tasks, only those tasks which has been assigned to them. So how product will know that this particular task is for a user A and this particular task is for user B? For that, we have a concept of roles, okay? Let's say in any application we are designing, maybe you think about of any banking application, there could be different roles will be there, right? Somebody is performing a role of branch manager, somebody is performing a role of relationship manager, somebody is performing a role of KYC officer to validate the documents, right? So all these are just and somebody is doing a role of maybe uh, other verification checks as well, okay? So all these are different type of activities which will be performed by the different type of roles. So when you create those roles, right, maybe KYC officer, you have Mohan and maybe one more user from the bank who is part of the KYC officer, and maybe Yashwant is having a role of branch manager, okay, and I am handling a role of relationship manager, okay. So when we create an application, right, it will be having different phases, right? What is that phase means? It will start from here and it will go on, it will complete when it will reach to this particular other circle, right? So it has a journey, it has a sequence of a step to get executed. So it will always initiate from the start and it will always complete with the end, which is this circle. In between, we have a lot of activities to be performed, which may or may not trigger, depends upon what logic we are implementing, right? That is why we have gateways as well. But to again cut it short, what happens whenever a particular activity will reach to a particular user task, it will be performed by a set of users. So that is where we have this assignment is there, who will be assigned for that particular task, okay? Maybe only a single user has to work on that, or maybe if you want to have it for multiple users, right, we can directly assign those particular user names here with the comma separated value. And also we can assign candidate groups as well, which means excuse me, we can create a group like a relationship officer in BPM, and in that group we can assign the users. So one user can be part of different groups as well, right? But again, whenever we assign a particular group, right, which means somebody who is having that particular access for that, or which has been any user who is part of that group, right, only he or she can act on that particular task if it is pending, and those tasks they can see on the task list. Clear? So that task list is coming by default with the product. However, many companies will also say we don't want to use that particular inbuilt skill. We want to create our own application, our own UI, maybe in React, maybe in Angular JS, or maybe in any other UI components where they want to do a lot of customization, right? And they don't want to use it. Then that is also possible. That's why the product is quite flexible. If you don't want to use that, maybe 3 out of 10 customers, they don't want to use the task list, right? Or they are not comfortable with that, or they already have some dashboard, right, where they don't want to make multiple logins for the existing user. They can also create their custom application, but again that will be doing the same thing. It will display the task which has been pending for user. Okay, and then all the data which we are displaying on this screen, right, they are coming from backend, right, by REST API or Java API. So in task list, which is already a part of the product, you don't have to write all those REST APIs or Java APIs. But if in case you are creating any custom applications, again, the same APIs which has been executing in the backend, right, in order to get the pending task, in order to get the completed task. We have also few tasks, right, which has been completed. If you want to see what all task has been already completed by a particular user, all these are part of the task list, right? So for getting all this data, we have different APIs which has been run. Okay. So all this data, you can get it if you're using out of the box component. But again, in the backend, all this task has been getting displayed, not as any wonder. There is a APIs is there, which is fetching some data from the database. Okay. So APIs are just acting as a backend interface, which will fetch the data and display to the UI. As simple as that. So if you are using task list, that has been handled by the product itself. But even if you want to create any custom application, you can use those APIs. So we will discuss what are the different types of APIs are there, okay, and what is the purpose of them. And also, Camunda has a Swagger documentation maintained where anytime you can go and check all the details of all the APIs which has been there. Any doubt about the task list?
Understood, sir.
Great. Now, the other component is cockpit. So can somebody say this cockpit is an inbuilt component of the product, or we have to create it by our own by looking into this diagram? Inbuilt. Very good. Yeah. So again, cockpit, as I mentioned, right, this block in this architecture, right? I have similar components with the blue outline, which means it is part of the inbuilt product. So now cockpit is again, it is been used to display the data. Like in Camunda 8, we have operate, exactly same purpose. But it is been used by the technical users or sometimes business users as well. Why I'm saying technical users? Because cockpit will be used in order to do the monitoring as well as the troubleshooting. Monitoring means somebody wants to see how many instances are running, how many instances are completed, right? How many applications have been deployed, when is the last application deployed. So you don't have to go to the database or somewhere else and do some queries. Everything has been displayed as part of the UI, and that UI is inbuilt UI as part of the out of the box implementation, which is also known as OOTB. Whenever you see, right, OOTB, which means out of the box implementation. And that also means it comes with the product itself because you are paying for that particular license. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel again. All the details will be displayed there. Then second point of cockpit or operate, I'll always say monitoring and troubleshooting. So what is the troubleshooting? When you have some troubles, when you have some errors, when you have some any exceptions in the process, definitely you can go and check the logs at any point in time. That's what we do. If any application fails, right, the first thing what we'll do is we go and check the application logs, right? What has happened? There you will find a lot of exceptions, right? Which is for technical user. As it's a low code platform, you can also get the leverage of getting those exceptions, right, in the cockpit or maybe operate. So cockpit, whenever I'll say we are talking about Camunda 7, and operate whenever I'll say we are talking about Camunda 8. But both will do the same functionality. They will deliver the same functionality of monitoring and troubleshooting the instances. So when we deploy any application, those applications which we modeled, okay, if we deploy those applications, this application, if we deploy, right, and then we started using creating the instances, right, of those applications. That it could be hundreds or thousands or millions of transactions, right, for this particular process with the time we have. And again, it depends upon the usage. So if you want to get all these stats around, okay, how many are running instances, how many are completed instances, or if any instances has been failed, these details we can get it from operate or cockpit in the Camunda 7. So it will display the details of the instances. Okay. As of now, we are not able to see because I have not created any cluster. And that is one of the exercises we will be doing. It is very simple and straightforward how to create the clusters, right? Because we are using cloud version, right, of this. So the way we have installed the Camunda, right, it is even more easier to create the clusters. Okay. When we have a cluster, which means we have any machine, right, assigned to our logged in user, okay, for the trial version. And then we'll be able to deploy, we'll be able to see all the details, because then some machine will be there, right, to store the data. So I'll tell you how to create the cluster and what are the, what you can say, mm, key things you have to consider when you are creating a cluster. Because when you create a cluster, you will get some details as well of the cluster machine, which will be only available to you on the screen when you are creating it. It has the cluster, what you can say, ID, and then credentials as well. So that credentials you always have to store it, okay, save it, because it will be reference for the future purpose. And other details like ID and other things, you can definitely get it, which region it is in, but the password, right, will not be regenerated again. And that password is quite important. That's why I'm not doing it for now. When we start our hands-on exercises, we'll be creating those clusters as well. So as of now, you are not getting this data because we don't have a cluster in the backend. But again, cockpit is being used in order to get the details. And also when you have any exceptions, you can check those exceptions, those high level of error messages, right, you can see into the cockpit screen. Also, if you want to fix those errors, right, for those errors which can be handled in terms of like if you have any data issues, okay, and you see, okay, for processing a particular request, that particular type of data, right, it should be some integer value should be there, okay, but instead of that we got some what you can say, malicious data, which is not in the integer form. What happens usually, integers is like some numeric value, right? So instead of numeric value, you have in that form assigned from the backend some characters instead of number. Let's say you want to enter some date, or maybe you wanted to enter some age of a customer, okay, and age, it should be a numeric value. Age could be like any number from starting from 1 to 100, usually you will be having. But by any reasons, let's say you have some data corruption, okay, for that particular instance, where the age value is like with some string value, which is, let's say, uh, Roy. Then what happens when further calculations are happening based on the age? Maybe you want to see if the age is less than 18 years, right? You don't want to issue a license to a particular customer, okay? Or if the age is greater than 65, you don't want to issue a credit card or loan to a particular customer. Depends upon use case, right? But again, you need this particular value, right, in order to perform some calculations. And when you are performing this calculation, let's say you are comparing an age, you can compare with some number only, right? Like it can be less than 18 or it can be greater than 60, whatever. So you are going to compare with number only. But if you're comparing ROI, which has come as a malicious data, comparing it with any arithmetic operator like less than 80, ROI is less than 80, what happens? Will that business rule or will that condition work? Say yes or no.
First condition
That is
is more
not we are
than
talking
18,
about.
right?
Exactly. So we are not talking about any Camunda, but as a general case, right? In order to get the understanding
If
why
like
we may require
if condition, something.
exactly. But in if condition, we are comparing a number with a string, right? Like you're
Mm-hmm.
comparing ROI. If condition will work if I have like is 17 is less than 18, it will return true. If we can compare 20 is less than 18, okay, it will return false, right?
Yes.
But if I'll compare ROI is less than 18, what happens? System will generate error, right? Usually. You cannot
Error,
compare
yes.
a number with a string. So that's where.
Strings.
So let's say we have this hypothetical example, right? Some malicious data has come. I have just given one of the example here, okay? And based on that, right, what happens? System doesn't able to perform the operation, and it will throw an exception and move to an error state. So those errors, right, you can see from the cockpit or operate, and also it gives them leverage to the because it has been intended for the technical or system admin users. Okay, you can also have an leverage to modify the data itself. You don't have to go to the database or you don't have to write, though you can do that. Okay, nobody's stopping that. You can also update by using APIs, but again, from this screen itself, you can modify the data. Okay, that's what the advantage of these particular screens. If you have any troubleshooting to be done, you want to modify some data, that can be done. That's why this access for these particular screen set will not be given to all the users. It will be given to some technical or administrative users. Clear? And then in Camunda 7, we have an admin screen, which has been used again by the administrator in order to manage the identity, which means if you want to create any users, you want to do the deployment, or you want to create some groups, all these things, right, you can perform from the admin tab. So modular, task list, cockpit, and admin, all these are the application which is part of the product. Okay. And as they are UI components, right? Like we can see here some details. Let's say you are getting some details on the task list or operate, right? These details are being popped up to the screen. Okay. They are just getting displayed to the screen. But in the end, this is getting retrieved from the Camunda database, right? How we are getting this data? By leveraging the REST APIs, okay, of the engines. So different APIs are there, which are fetching the data from the database and displaying to the UI. And all this phase, right, task list, cockpit, or admin, right, this is known as execution phase, execute phase. Any questions, guys, so far?
Yeah, do we come under developer or like are you telling the entire end-to-end cycle of the command?
Yeah,
Like
I'm telling about the architecture, right?
okay,
Camunda end-to-end, Camunda
okay.
like components. So that's what the
Yes.
title is, Camunda 7 components. So that is the whole product is all about, right? It has APIs, it has. So now we are into very initial stage, right? That's why I told initially we'll be discussing about some theory parts, okay, discussion. But when we do the hands-on, right, your readiness should be there. At least whatever terms we are going to use, right, you should be familiar with them. At least you should be aware what this particular component will do. That's where we are getting readiness of getting what you can say, uh, getting deeper and wider to the product.
Here admin in the sense like you mean commander admin or uh, do we act as in
No,
the
no, no, it's a Camunda admin screen. You call it as a Camunda admin.
okay.
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 But most of the time, you guys have to mostly deal with this modeler phase, okay? If you are working as a developer. And for the some testing purpose, you'll be doing it for the task list and cockpit as well. Okay.
Okay.
Now, this database, what type of database are being supported officially by the product? Okay. What is the list? How we can configure a database, right? And if there is no database is there and you want to create some application, how it will be done? Because we have also in-memory database as well. If we work on any machine, right? S2 database. So what are those database? How we can configure those databases in our application? That is something we have in detail, what you can say, the exercises to perform on that, right? So, and when we do that, right, what are the different product tables are being created? Though in day out, I don't see we have to go into the database and see all the details, but at least we should have a knowledge of all the product key tables. Okay, what is the purpose of those tables? How data is being getting stored into the database tables? That we will also see in detail. But as of now, I'm just describing the components what we have. Shall I move to the next slide?
Yeah, which database do we use? I mean, in real time, or it depends on the
Yeah,
product?
so in real time, like the most popular databases which I have come across is been used by the end customers is Postgres database, which has been also like been officially supported and been recommended for the best performance. Okay. However, at the same time, I also see many customers who are using MS SQL as well as Oracle database. So these are the three most commonly used databases I have come across. But again, there is a list of database which has been supported. So if you have any requirement, right, to be used, you can pick any those databases, okay, and you can use it. So what does the mean of the official supported? If there are any issues, right, or concerns with the connectivity or some issues happen from the database side, then product is responsible for that and they will provide the support for that. Am I answered your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, with that, I'll move on to the next slide. So when we have discussed about the component side, this is the architecture of the Camunda 7. Okay. What does it mean is we have always a browser, okay, from where we are going to access the components, whether it's a modeler or whether it's a cockpit or whether it's a any other screen as well. Okay. In between, we have a load balancer, which is not mandatory. We can have it if required, depends upon how many, what is the load on that particular application, right? So load balancer is just manage the load where we can split the network, right? The requests which are been coming from the end users or the outside system into multiple different nodes. Okay. So again, it depends upon requirement. Then we have a Camunda run, which is known as Camunda Platform as well. Okay. That will be having the embedded engine, okay, which has the Camunda engine, okay, and which has Camunda REST APIs and Camunda web app. Web app means cockpit and task list. So all these applications, right, we can have a multi nodes. Okay, we can also create it or deploy it into the multiple nodes as a clustered environment, and that we can execute as a Java Spring Boot application or in a containerized manner as well. Apart from that, we have the custom applications which we usually write. Like if there is a requirement, right, of customization as part of the backend code, then we create an Spring Boot applications, okay, which has the dependencies of the Camunda, okay, and there we have the REST endpoints. Let's say if we want to invoke something or we want to get some details from the Camunda or we want to pass some details to the Camunda and we wanted to do it by REST API, we can create those controllers, okay, what you can say. And then if we want to have any other external task workers, right, or business logic to be involved, we can write those particular custom Java code which can be fetched by using the service task. Okay, so we have a database tables for the product engine, okay, and also we can have a same database or a different database as well, depends upon requirement to requirement for our custom applications as well. And this custom Spring Boot application, right? If we have any a requirement to integrate with the third party applications, right? So usually what happens is this integration will comes from this particular custom application. So we will do all the configuration. Let's say we wanted to integrate with any messaging queue, or we want to send any notification, right? So though we can do it by out of the box connectors, which has been available in the Camunda run, but if there is any requirement, we want to do it as a custom code. Okay, we want to send some notification with some beautiful templates. Okay, in a defined manner where we have some good compose email with the body, right, which have some templates defined. Just take an example where we want to do the customization of the email. So if we are writing that particular code, right, it has to integrate with some other third-party systems as well. Then this particular Spring Boot application will be integrated with those third-party components. How we'll be doing the configuration into the application YAML, application properties. So don't worry about that. Okay, it is just a high-level architecture, but you will understand when we are going to have this assignment to be done right here as part of the project. Okay, so what is the application YAML? What are the properties we need to set? How we can write the job workers and other things, right? That is something a real-time application will be creating, and you guys will be doing by your own. And if we have any questions and queries around it, right, that time we can discuss those queries as well. So don't worry about that. And again, this POM XML, right, will have the required dependencies of Camunda, right, to get the what you can say the functionality to be enabled for that Spring Boot application. And what is a Spring Boot application? How we can create it? That again we are going to do it from the scratch. Don't worry about it. So in Camunda 7, which is an also known as embedded architecture. What is an embedded architecture is like we have a Spring Boot application, which is a base application having embedded engines, which means we use those particular engines, right, of Camunda 7, whether it's a BPM engine, whether it's a CMMN engine, or whether it's a DMN engine. We use it as an embedded engine dependencies, which means it will be execute as part of your application. Okay, how? Because we will have the dependencies of those engines configured in our Spring Boot application. Okay, so in a Spring Boot application, we have the dependencies sections like this. Okay, if you want to have add any dependency, which means if you want to add any jar, right, dependency is something we create one application and there is another application is there, and we want to use this other application into our main application. We use it as a jar, right? So in a Spring Boot application, we'll use the dependencies. So we have a Spring Boot application, which is a base application having the embedded engine dependencies of BPMN, CMMN, and DMN. We have not discussed about the basics of these things, right? So in maybe tomorrow session, right, I'll start fresh with the maybe in tomorrow, maybe day after tomorrow, depends, because we have not covered the Camunda 8 architecture. Then basically we are going to start fresh with the BPM and CMM concepts. Okay, when we can think of having design the BPM and workflows, when what is the purpose of using the CMM and workflows, what is the purpose of having the introduction of DMM workflows. Okay, at least the basic concept, and then definitely the 2 or 2.5 weeks time, right, we will be playing around with the BPMN and the DMN task, and then in the last the CMMN. Okay, where we are going to have all these components what you have seen right on the left hand palette side. We'll be using this, and I'll be describing it you step by step. Okay, what are the different shapes? Okay, what are the particular those elements are meant for, and then for all those elements, like whether it's an event or activity or gateway, we have a lot of exercise to be done. So that's how all these exercises, right, we'll be doing it one by one. But again, to have the concepts, right, why and when we should use the basics, we'll be covering maybe on day after tomorrow. One start. Then we have a modeler. As I'm not going to repeat it again, we use it for the development of the workflows, and also we can export those files, which will be part of your deployment for the higher environments. Task list or custom applications intended for end users to process or view tasks, same thing which I have told before, okay? And those tasks can be processed based on their roles. Cockpit is again out of the box Camunda UI used to operate for technical and business users for monitoring and troubleshooting. Admin is again for administrative tasks, like they want to migrate those instances, they want to use view the process instances, or they want to create some users and groups as well. And database, it has a Camunda BPM product tables for task list and modeler. So it has the required product tables from where you are getting and getting the data being fetched. I think we have covered Camunda 7 architecture. Are you guys also going through the videos later part as well? Just as I mentioned on the day one, right? We try to get some 10 or 15 minutes of time to revise those particular concepts as well. Because as of now, we have not started with the hands-on exercise, and that will get started by mid of next week. Okay. But at least if something is getting missed, right, I'll encourage you to have what you can say, the review of those concepts which we are discussing, and also just go on Google whatever points we are learning, right, as we are into a very initial stages as well. If you find any queries around it, right, because it's a very wide community of Camunda, if you type or search anything about that, right, you'll find a lot of things around it. So just go and spend some 15 minutes or 30 minutes of time whenever you get some time, maybe in the afternoon or before you get sleep, right? Just try to get some knowledge around that particular topic and come up with the questions or queries. It will definitely help everyone, right, to get groomed on those topics and to have what you can say even better understanding on that.
By default, we deal with the Spring Boot application.
Yes, usually when we go for the deployment, right, we'll deal with the Spring Boot applications. That is been part of the ecosystem, most of the projects, which is been part of the company. But again, it depends upon the responsibilities as well, whether the same person, right, who's working on Camunda, right, has to work on what you can say, the backend part as well for managing those Spring Boot applications. Normally, those applications, right, will be created at the time of installation and setup. You don't have to create it again and again. Okay. But what we are going to learn is considering you will be working on a fresh project, right? Maybe if somebody will give you an opportunity to create those microservice, right? Again, you will be able to do that, though it won't be required, because when you are in a project, right, that project is already running, that installation, setup, Spring Boot service, everything will be already part of it. But that doesn't mean you don't have to learn it, right? And again, and there are different types of responsibilities are there. Few projects where the responsibility of a Camunda expert is to do the modeling. Okay, they have to do the low code as well only. Okay, sometimes there is an expectation they also should do the backend part as well a little bit. Sometimes there is an expectation that guy also know the CI/CD. Okay, sometimes there is an expectation that they also know about having writing some test cases as well if you are having any custom code. So again, it depends a lot, depends upon the type of project and kind of the team you have, right? So, but most of the time, the more core responsibility which lies for a Camunda developer, right, as a low code developer, you should be familiar with the product. You should be through with the modeling development. You should understand the concepts of BPM and CMM and DMN and also the forms. What are the different components we have? What is the best way of utilizing them? What are the different deployment what you can say, topologies we can use in a particular system if there is a consulting is required. Okay, but with the time, if you have the other knowledge, right, it is always good to have. So Spring Boot
Okay, like
application will be part, and you won't have to do it from the scratch, but you will be learning it as part of the training.
we will be doing coding in the Spring Boot application or in some other applications.
Yeah, that will be, it won't be coding, you can say, like you have to write some piece of code, a little bit code, right? Let's say if you have any service task or if you have any REST API to be called, right? Then if you have to expose those controllers, that's a minimal coding. But again, that will be part of your Spring Boot application. So if you see here, right, this is one of the Spring Boot application, okay, which has the dependencies of the Camunda 8. So let's say if you have any coding to do, you can write a particular method here, right? This much is your method for executing one service task. So how we can call that, right? What is the naming conventions? What are the annotations, right? Which will be common to use for a service task, because usually when you are going for having a custom code, when you are having a requirement of service task, okay, what is a service task? We'll discuss it, okay? Or maybe you have any REST API task as there. Then you will come here and do some coding. And that will be part of your application, Spring Boot application, because there only the engine dependencies will be there. Any other questions?
Fine, sir. All works.
Okay. So with that, I'll stop for today. Okay. And wish you rest of the day. Have a good day, and we'll connect again tomorrow.